Hello, and welcome to Women in Business, where we interview entrepreneurs and senior managers and show you the strengths, successes, obstacles, and roadblocks women experience in business. Since I believe every person in business needs to be visible, I'd like to invite you to watch www.sob6, that's the number 6, tips.com, which will give you some valuable information should you get the call to be on radio or TV, which I think is extremely important. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at Gayle Carson, that's Gayle, Gayle Carson 13 at gmail.com, or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter.
Hi, everyone. This is Gayle Carson. And I wanted to offer something to you wonderful listeners. So many people have been saying that they want to have a conversation with me, but didn't know how to do it. So I'm going to offer this again. If you'll go to my website, spunkyoldbroad.com, and fill in the form there saying that you would like a consultation with me, I would be more than happy to do that for you with on complimentary basis. You're my listeners, and I'm anxious to talk with you. So if you're interested in the conversation with me, just go to spunkyoldbroad.com, and they will be able and fill out the form, and I will be in touch with you. But right now, I have a wonderful, wonderful guest for you today. Her name is Claudette Rowley, and she is the CEO of Cultural Business, or Cultural Brilliance, I should say. She's a change management consultant, a cultural designer, and an executive coach. She's passionate about helping leaders and organizations resolve complex organizational problems in ways that honor the intelligence of their cultural systems and the brilliance of their people. She is the creator of the Cultural Brilliance System and hosts a globally syndicated radio show. She also teaches a course on culture and communication at Northeastern University and is the author of Cultural Brilliance, the DNA of Organizational Excellence, a step-by-step guide to activating the greatness in your organization. Welcome to the show, Claudette.
Oh, thanks so much, Gayle. Great to be here.
Well, I have a bunch of questions for you. And the first
good.
one is, in your book, you describe the Cultural Brilliance System, but I'm not really sure that I know what it is. So tell us a little bit about it and how it helps organizations.
Oh, I'd be happy to. Thanks so much for asking. So the Cultural Brilliance System is a process that helps, really a roadmap that helps organizations, any kind of organization, transform its culture into something that's more brilliant, more life-giving, that really honors people and brings out the best in them. And so the system has three main phases, and just to give just a quick highlight of each one for listeners, the first one is really understanding how your culture operates. So it's hard to change what we don't really understand, whether that's understanding ourselves or understanding how our culture operates. So it's an assessment about how your culture really authentically operates, what's great about it, what's not so great about it, what's working and what isn't. And then once you've gathered that information, you move into the second phase of the process where you really are designing what the kind of culture that you want and need in your organization to succeed, to be your best selves, to really capture your market share, whatever your goals are as a company. Really capture that potential that's in that greatness that's inherent inside all organizations. And you go through this design process, and then you take what you've learned there and you start to plan and actually implement the changes to the culture. So that's the system in a nutshell. It's really this roadmap to help organizations who might be thinking, we need to repair our culture, or we have a pretty good culture, but we'd like a great one, and they don't really know how to do it. This system is designed to help them with that.
It sounds fascinating. I mean, I can't imagine that a company, well, what happens is you start off small and the company grows and grows and things change, but the way you do things don't often change along with it.
Right.
So what are the best sizes, or what kind of companies do you work with where this really is implemented to the best of its ability?
I've worked with companies of all different sizes and industries, and one of the reasons I can do that with this system is because the system itself is it's a tool, right? So it's not in the book, I don't say you should have this certain kind of culture and great culture looks like this or that, because I think of culture like a fingerprint, right? Every culture is unique. Cultures may be similar or they may overlap, but they're really unique. So I've worked, with companies of 35 people. I've worked with a company of thousands of people, and it just really, it's a process that can apply to almost any industry and any size company, which is great that it's that flexible.
So what is the role that leaders play in this? I mean, I know that, really people take their lead from the people who lead them. So what's the role of leadership in company culture?
Yeah, the role of leadership is to be on board with first of all, to be on board with the change. So sometimes people will say to me, well, I really want to make a change in our culture, but the leaders aren't on board with it. I'm really sorry. That's a tough battle, because you have to get the leaders on board. Otherwise, you're pushing a boulder up a hill. So the role of the leader is to be on board. The other really, really important role a leader has it's simple, but not always easy, as we know, is listening. Is really, really listening to what they hear, like not what they wanted to hear or hope to hear. Because we know listening to what we hear sometimes can be painful. It can be hard to take in that information, but really listen to what they hear and be open to feedback, being open to understand where they may have blind spots, because as we know, all human beings have blind spots. No one can see an entire culture, including a leader. But really being open to that, gathering that information and hearing people's feedback and their input. And when a leader's willing to do that, really amazing transformational things can happen in an organization.
But who brings you in if the leaders are not buying into this? In other words, who's telling you that there needs to be this culture of change if it isn't the leader? So who is bringing you in, and then how does that relate to leadership?
So the only people really bringing me in are leaders. Because if they're not on board, right, they're not going to hire me. So, and in fact, even if it's a human resources, maybe a VP of human resources, someone at the top level, they may say, we'd like to talk with you about this. But if that CEO is not, if there's a CEO in the organization, or the executive director, if it's nonprofit, whomever, if they're not on board with it, and they're not open to a conversation to see if they might come on board with it, right, then we're probably not going to work together. Sometimes people will, as you mentioned, I have a radio show, or they'll read the book, or they'll hear me speak, and they'll come up to me and say, or get in touch with me and say, I really want to help my organization. But yeah, and what I can do is work with them and talk with them on how they might position a culture change, how they might talk to a leader in their organization to see if that leader would be open to another conversation.
Interesting. So you also say, though, that leaders have a hard time assessing and addressing their cultures. Mm-hmm. So why is that? And if I've asked you to come in mm-hmm. and to do this, why then do I really have mixed feelings about it?
Right. So why is that? I think and we know a really good leader feels responsible for the culture. And so they feel, at some level they feel bad. They feel like maybe they failed the company. They haven't done the right things. If they take a look at the culture and realize there are things that need to shift and change. And, one way I talk with them about that, and you said it at the very beginning of the show, we start small in a company and we do things a certain way, and we don't always change or evolve how we're doing them, which means that the culture may not form the way or evolve or grow the way it needs to. So sometimes it's just a very innocuous, it's not that the leader didn't do a good job or someone set out to, work against the company's success. It can just be an innocuous evolution of the culture that causes, it forms in a way that doesn't really support the company. So I go through that conversation with leaders, and for some of them, they find that really helpful. And they, by the time, if I'm coming in and we've signed a contract and we've agreed to work together and we've decided how we're working together, they don't usually have too many mixed feelings anymore, other than, as we all know, when we're approaching change, right, it's natural to have some concerns, just because we know it might be hard or we know it might be messy. But at the point that we're going to work together, they have to be confident that they're doing the right thing.
So I'm going to ask you a really, I think, important question. Mm-hmm. What are the biggest cultural challenges that you've seen in the work that you're doing? Is there any similarity? Is everybody different? Is there a theme that kind of runs across it? Have you seen a change over the years you've been doing this? Tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, I think that there are, although all cultures are different, there definitely are trends and themes. One is this trend around people wanting more from their cultures now, right? Wanting more from their organizations, and we see that in literature around retention, right? Engagement, talent development, because people are leaving companies when they don't feel engaged. People are leaving companies when they don't feel that the culture is in alignment with what they're looking for, right? When they feel disrespected, when they don't feel valued. And I think, in generations past or decades past, people were willing to put up with that because they didn't think about work necessarily as something they needed to really love or enjoy. And I think that's a trend that's changing. Something else that I see that's really important is more and more companies realizing that a lack of trust in their organization, a lack of emotional safety, and by emotional safety, I mean that I can speak up and I can share an idea, I can share an unpopular opinion. I'm not worried I'm going to lose my job, right? Or someone's going to stab me in the back. That there needs to be some level of basic trust so that we're treating each other with respect. And that's much more of a conversation now. And leaders are seeing how important that is. So those are two big ones. And then the other one I think that's been, in the news over and over again, especially in the last year, things like Wells Fargo, Papa John CEO, Uber, the Me Too movement, where we see leaders being held accountable for things that they did culturally that maybe in the past would have been swept under the rug. And I think that's a big change we're seeing also.
Well, I think that has a lot to do with our communication now. There's just so many ways to communicate.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing is a secret anymore. There's cameras everywhere. People are recording everything on their phones. You can't, I mean, it's just impossible to hide anymore.
Right.
And, all the things when people say, I object to this and I object to that, I think to myself, I don't mind any of that thing because I'm not doing anything wrong. I mean, if I was doing things wrong, I'd want to hide all these things, but I don't really recognize all these privacy things because, frankly, I don't care what people think I'm doing because I'm not doing anything wrong. So,
Right.
I just think it's a whole different philosophy of how you look at things. But you mentioned in your book something called a cultural safety zone.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
Yeah, cultural safety zone is about establishing, as an organization or a team, it depends on who's doing the culture work, how you're going to interact around your discussions on culture, right? So we know for most organizations, especially if they're having an issue with their culture, talking about it is not going to feel very comfortable or potentially safe, right? So we want to have a very overt conversation about how those discussions will take place. And that's this idea of creating a cultural safety zone. So it's this, creating ground rules around how you interact. Is the information confidential or not? How will the information be used? How do we want to treat how will we know we're treating each other with respect? Things like that. So when the conversations come up and people are maybe sharing their truth, their truth of their experience, and it may make them feel very vulnerable, they know that there are parameters. There's a safety zone around what they're sharing.
Well, I think, I wish that every organization had that. I'm not sure. In fact, I know that there are not.
Yeah.
Yet, I think, too, it's very interesting. You have two different levels of workers today. You have millennials that are coming in and saying, look, I am willing not to do anything that I don't want to do, and I don't really need all this individual type of thing. I can go out and get a job wherever I want it. So you can't do to me what you used to do to me. On the other hand, you've got people in that over 50, 60 crowd who are really hard workers. I mean, they have a dedication to doing the right thing and doing it well. So I would think that there's a big dichotomy there in the organizations themselves as to how everybody is working together. What have you found out about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. People do ask me about that, and I know the dichotomy you're talking about. And it's interesting and the clients I'm thinking about that I'm working with now or worked in the past, in those specific companies, although there have been age ranges for sure, people in their 20s, people in their 50s, right, et cetera, and everything in between, I haven't seen it be that much of an issue, actually. What I've seen more, there might be people who aren't performing well as individuals, right? And they could be any age. But it seems in these particular companies, it's more the culture driving, right? As we know, culture can and does, right? Culture driving the performance, right? So it's more if there was a lack of performance that wasn't specific to a person, but maybe specific to a team or a group, it more had to do with what was going on culturally there than someone's age or generation. So I sometimes wonder how, if that gets a little bit oversimplified, right? Because I find in some companies it's not even showing up as an issue.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what do you consider authentic cultures?
Authentic cultures are cultures that know themselves, right? Organizational cultures that know themselves. So they understand what's great, what's brilliant, what's great about them, what they do really well, and they also understand where they have some weak spots or spots they need to shore up, right? They need to pay attention to over time. So it has that level of authenticity of knowing. It's just like a person being authentic, right? They know who they are and they act that way.
So how long does it take normally? And I know this is, going to vary, but how long normally does it take to make this cultural change?
So I'm working with an organization now. It's definitely a smaller company. We've been working together for about a year, and we're about 75% of the way through the change would be my estimate, right? So let's say another, 6 months or so. And then a larger organization, I'd say 2 to 3 years. Sometimes it could take even longer. And the caveat would be that it depends on how deep of a change we need to make. Is it a culture that's really gotten toxic, so we're doing a lot of repair work, so to speak? Or is it more an organization that maybe, the culture is not meeting the needs of the company anymore? Maybe it's just sort of okay, but it's not terrible, and they want it to be great again, right? So it depends how big of a leap we're taking.
So if when you consider a small organization, how big is that?
Small, let's say under 250 employees.
Okay, that's good. That's small. Well, all of this is very interesting because I definitely see a need for this. I see a real need for what you're doing. And I see organizations that are trying, but just really don't know how.
Right.
And then I think I see organizations I really do see organizations that don't care.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering about organizations, for example, who franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got some company-owned places, and then you've got franchise owners. Do you see differences in that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I had a conversation with a franchise. It didn't end up working with them, but we had an initial conversation, and this was the owner of the franchise itself, and they were making some big changes with franchisees. And what I noticed in that discussion is that there was less. It was more of this is what we're doing, and if people don't like it, they can sell their franchises. Just to sum it up, right? There was less concern for the culture of the organization and bringing people along than I might have seen in a company with direct employees, where I tend to hear occasionally I will hear someone say, if this person doesn't really like it here, they can go. But most of the time, I'm not hearing that because everyone knows how, unless someone's a poor performer, everyone knows how much it costs to rehire, retrain, right, and to go through that entire process. So usually there's more of a desire to keep people. So that is an interesting question. And in that one case, I did really notice a difference. There was a lack of, I think, direct connection to how this franchisor was impacting the franchisees.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking also of things, like department stores who have all these locations all over, and what is that? Because that's not a franchise. That's
right.
Company owned, and yet, but they really, the powers that be and corporate headquarters, wherever it is, I mean, I wonder if they really know what's going on day to day. I mean, certainly you have experience, and I have experience, poor service, poor treatment of customers, and many things that are wrong. I mean, we could make a whole list here.
Right.
What do they do in that situation? I mean, have you encountered any of that?
It's interesting because when you have, like you said, let's say it's a big department store, right, or Home Depot or whatever, right? You have all these stores all around, and they're geographically dispersed, and One of the best things that they can do, because it's how could they possibly, they can't really possibly know the day to day, so they're missing so much information probably. And what I do know is that people who are working, let's say it's a big conglomerate with lots of stores around the country in a geographic area, and what I know is that people who are working in those stores, like in that day to day on the ground capacity, have amazing ideas usually about how to solve problems.
That's
And
true. I agree with you. I
yeah, and they're
totally agree with you.
almost often overlooked, right? They're not really honored. And so if there was some kind of, often what I'm encouraging is some sort of feedback system that's taken seriously, not just like we submit, an idea and nothing ever happens. So, but it's taken seriously, where people really come up with solutions to problems. And if you give people, you empower people and you give them some ownership, within a certain set of parameters to solve problems down on the ground level, a lot of really positive things would happen store to store, and I've seen that happen before.
Well, I would almost say we're regressing in that area. Years and years and years ago, I used to teach a lot on customer service.
Yeah.
And we had all kinds of examples where the customers had, the employees had saved hundreds of thousands of dollars by suggestions that they had implemented that not only would make their life easier, but the customer's life easier too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing that less and less today than ever. However, we have about 5 minutes left, so I want to get to your book. What made you write Cultural Brilliance? And have these companies that are hiring you read it?
So what made me write it? It was an idea I came up with about 3 years ago, and one thing led to the next, and I thought the book, I want to share these ideas, right? I really want to contribute this to the world, and the book seemed like a great way to do that, to put it in more people's hands, put the ideas out there. But it really, for me, was about helping to solve a big problem, which is how to create better cultures, right? And what's the way to do it? Because even when a company gets invested, they don't always know how to get there. So I was inspired to share this, from the spirit of contributing and helping and adding something into this conversation on culture. And have people, companies, organizations that I'm currently working with, yes, have the book, and they have certainly read at least parts of it for sure, because I've talked with the leaders and other folks in the organizations, and I'm also sending it out to a lot of CEOs. I'm getting the word out there as much as possible about the book, so people know about it.
That's fabulous. Yeah. Well, let's find out, first of all, how can our audience get in touch with you? How do they find out where you are? Where can they get your book? And I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to offer to our listeners, but we're open to that as well. So tell us a little bit about Claudette.
Absolutely. So my website is culturalbrilliance.com. And the book is on there. The book is also right on Amazon, which of course is super easy. And the website I have a resource page. And so there are articles, podcasts, my radio show. There's a free cultural assessment resource that I'd love to offer listeners. If you just go culturalbrilliance.com, go to the resources button, you'll see on the page it says cultural assessment, and that's a free resource you can download and use with your organization to start to really jumpstart you thinking about your culture and getting information about it. Absolutely. So, and then I have, a contact page on the website. I'd love to hear from anybody. I'm happy to have a conversation and talk with you about your culture and help you troubleshoot and give you some ideas.
That sounds great. So in the few minutes that we have left, what would you say the biggest mistake is that people make regarding cultural change?
The biggest mistake is taking action without understanding your culture first and understanding the culture you want, your target culture, the culture you want to evolve into. So best to really take the time to understand, assess, and listen first, and then plot how you're going to take action.
Wow, that's great. I think if there's anybody listening here and they really know that their culture really does need a change, and you're not in a position of power or whatever, maybe what you should do is buy Claudette's book and then put it on the desk.
Right.
That might might be a way to do it, or at least get it up the chain a little bit, because to me that would be the best way to do that. So if you want to know more information about Claudette, go to culturalbrilliance.com. She's got her books there. She's got a tremendous resource page. So you've got a lot of data there that would be very interesting for you. And I really am serious about getting the book and putting it on your CEO's desk, because if that's not a hint, I don't know what would. And you can do it maybe discreetly without anybody knowing who it is. So this has been really interesting, Claudette. We've really enjoyed having you as a guest. And again, I want to remind my listeners, if you would like a consultation with me or just to talk about anything that's on your mind, just go to spunkyoldbroad.com and leave a message for me on my contact page, and we'll get back to you and make sure we have a conversation. So Claudette, thank you again so much. And hopefully you're going to have a big success on everybody that comes in contact with you, because it's necessary. So thank you for your brilliance.
Oh, thank you so much, Gayle. Great to be here.
Thanks for listening to Women in Business. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you have any suggestions as to who you'd like me to have as a guest, just email me at gaylecarson13@gmail.com. Be sure to check out www.sob6tips.com. And in the meantime, go to www.spunkyoldbroad.com to see the resources I have for you.